Beningo brought this up. We talked about Matt Snell earlier, and a guy who knows all about the history of the Jets wrote a book about the Jet Super Bowl team is Bob Lederer, and Bob is called in, and he can share some thoughts on Matt Snell. Bob, appreciate you hopping on.
Hey, thanks very much, Jake. I appreciate it. Beyond Broadway Joe, the Super Bowl team that changed football. I only say that because I only have to sell 11,000 more books before I start getting royalties. So
11,000?
Any decade now that may kick in if I'm still alive. Hey, I didn't catch the beginning with Joe today, but I did see a note that Joe said something about Matt and the Jets. Can you fill me in on that?
Yeah, he talked about how Matt Snell never had a good relationship with the Jets dating back to Leon Hess, and the Jets have reached out in the past, and he wasn't at his Ring of Honor ceremony. And the story I heard, and you tell me if this is accurate in your reporting for the book you wrote, is that the Jets promised him a job after football, and they didn't come through with that job, and he held that against the Jet organization, even though no one that promised him that is still associated with the Jets.
That's I read that in several different places yesterday. And my book was a lot clearer about that than that. Okay. Sonny Werblin promised him a job when he signed the Jets, with the Jets in 1964. And he said to him, if you win a championship, and there was no Super Bowl back in 1964, if you win a championship, you will have a job for life with the Jet organization. Matt had to retire after the 72 season. His spleen had been completely burst, playing special teams his last year. And imagine that. Riggins had won the job at fullback. Matt still had a contract, and he went on the field and played special teams, which is where then and even today, for the most part, you play fringe players, guys that are too important or not important enough to risk being damaged. And several of the Jet players told me for the book that there was kind of a revolving door. The teams in the league, AFL and NFL, always had a list of next to bring in if somebody got hurt. But anyway, Matt had to retire. He burst his spleen, almost died on the field. He realized his career was over. They had an official ceremony in '63 that he was retiring, and Matt turned to the construction trade. Matt actually, as most people don't know, was a laborer building Shea Stadium in the 1960s. He did that in the summer, working at Shea Stadium. And actually, my dad was in the construction trade, and he got me jobs while I was in college a couple of years, where you can make some really nice money. So anyway, Matt did that as a kid, wanted to go into construction. And here is what really happened. He had no idea if Sonny had told the owners who forced him out in early 1968 about the promise he had made to Matt. And in fact, it was probably clear and reasonable to assume that he had not told the new owners, had not told Leon Hess, who by '72 was the majority owner of the team. Matt had an offer to be a foreman for a construction company in 1973. And all he needed was a reference from the New York Jets. Sounds simple, right? I mean, who wouldn't give a reference to a guy who helped you win the Super Bowl, who was the first major big-name player that the franchise had ever signed back 10 years earlier? Well, guess what? The Leon Hess organization told Matt, we have a policy, we don't give references to former players. Matt told me this at the very end of my interview with him. And in fact, it's online. Boy Green and I did a little segment about it probably 3-4 months ago. And it is on YouTube, so you can find it. And Matt was, at the time, he was stunned. Like, what do you mean you won't give me a reference? You won't give me a recommendation? How do you not recommend, anybody that played for you unless they're really, a terrible individual, which Matt was not, obviously. He was a leader of the team. He was obviously a star player, and he was a guy that, always made himself available. Matt's reaction, and by the way, Robbie Sabo asked me to write something about Matt, which I did. I sent it to him last night, and so I'll probably go into a little bit more detail when it gets posted, whenever that's going to be. Matt first was hurt that the Jets didn't give him the reference. Eventually, and it didn't take too long for that, his hurt turned to anger. And Matt became absolutely solidified in his belief that the Jets had done him wrong. And as time went on, he literally to himself said, I don't care what they do. I'm not gonna play ball with them on anything anymore. So they invite him to his induction ceremony for the Ring of Honor.
And he didn't go.
With Boozer, and he didn't go. And they invited him to the 50th anniversary celebration with all his teammates. And he not only didn't go, but he didn't even respond. Now, I was at the hotel on the weekend of the 50th anniversary celebration. And I got to backtrack a little bit. When my book was first put together, I was walked into the Jet offices by my buddy who had supplied me with all the Super Bowl information, had given me all of Weeb's playbooks, had given me all this information that eventually went into book, and I think made it a really special kind of celebration of all the players on the team, and not just, another Namath book. And I love Joe. But I know Joe hates the name of the book, Beyond Broadway Joe, because it infers that there was something there big, as important as Joe. But anyway, this guy at the Jet offices, who is still there, looks at me and says, hey, we're going to invite Matt and everybody else next year to the big ceremony. This is 2017. And I looked at him and I said, Matt's not coming. And he said, what do you mean? I said, read my book. Read the chapter on Matt. He's not coming. And he said, well, why is that? And I said, because you guys keep waiting for him to come to you. He's offended. He is angry that the Jet organization has not done anything, that they did him wrong when he really needed a job back in 1973-74. And nothing, he was left out in the cold, a former player. And, a lot of these guys, when their playing days are over, whether it's football, baseball, or whatever, if they haven't had multi-million-dollar contracts, and they didn't in those days, it can be real tough for them to survive. And I looked at this guy and I said, listen, I've developed a really nice relationship with Matt. I can't promise you, but if you want me to, I will do everything within my power to talk to Matt, to find out, what we possibly could do to get past this situation. And the guy looked at me and said, we don't need your help. And I went, okay. I made my offer. And I said to him, I'm not looking for publicity. I'd like you to buy a lot of my books and sell them in the ballpark, but I'm not looking for publicity about being, the guy who's going to turn Matt back into, Jet to fandom. I said, but I'm telling you, Matt is not walking in the front door on his own. And he looked at me and I said, last thing I'm going to say to you, if you want Matt Snell to come back, you're going to have to do something like tell Woody Johnson he's got to get in his limo, go over to Jersey City, knock on the door with Matt and say, Matt, I'm not leaving until you open the door because I've got to get this straightened out. Now, with the last time I was on with you, Robbie said to me that he had never heard about this. And so, Woody has no responsibility because it was Leon Hess that did the deed 50 years ago. Okay. But my point was that somebody had to be an adult as big as possible and bring this thing to a conclusion. Now, Matt was turning like 79 years old in 2017. And I knew he didn't have a lot of time left. It's not that he was deathly sick, but hey, all these football players, if they make it past 80, that's really something to cherish. Anyway, nothing happened. Jets didn't do anything. I had dinner with Matt late in 2017. He invited me to come to New York and break bread with him. And I met with him, and this is going to be important. I met with Matt, and I met with a guy named Gary DiFilippo, who was Matt's best friend for like 15 years. DiFilippo owns a corner, little supermarket in Jersey City, and Matt was going there day after day having coffee with Gary in the morning, and they got really tight. So the two of them had dinner with me, and at the end of dinner, I said, "Listen, I met with the Jets a couple of months ago, and wanting their help to buy the book and whatever. And I know they're going to invite you if they haven't already. And I don't recall if they'd already made the invitation or not. But I said, Matt, the fans of the Jets would love for you to be there for the 50th anniversary ceremony with all your friends, all your teammates. And Matt, I will tell you personally, I want you there because I want you to hear the crowd of 78,000 people cheer you. Because even those who don't know will find out before the ceremony what you did in Super Bowl III, which a lot of young fans, people I think who are closer, 40 years old or less, who are not, like you, Jake, or like a lot of the people, who watch your program, they don't really know what Matt Snell did in Super Bowl III, other than he was one of the stars of Super Bowl III. But he was more than just one of the stars. He and Namath together, won that Super Bowl. And in fact, a week or two after the Super Bowl, Sonny Werblin, again, no longer the owner of the Jets, bought Matt a Cadillac. And Matt was invited to the Cadillac dealer. He had no idea what was going on. And the dealer said, hey, we got a mint green Cadillac out back. And Sonny Werblin has given me a message. He'd like you to call me. Sonny got a call from Matt, and Sonny said, hey, as far as I'm concerned, you're the co-MVP of that Super Bowl game. You deserve this. All right, now, here's the real kicker. I've been going around for the last X number of years, but particularly the last 6 months or so with Boy Green. And I've been on my high horse saying, I don't understand why Woody Johnson has been unable to get off his high horse and do whatever it took to get Matt. Okay? Yesterday, after Matt died, Gary DiFilippo, who I referenced before, Matt's best friend for like 15 years, called me up yesterday morning and said, I got to tell you a story. I said, okay. He said, 5 or 6 years ago, I was at a bar with one of my boyhood buddies. It's a giant, excuse the expression, Jet season ticket holder, owns a lot of tickets. And he was on the phone as I was sitting there. He was on the phone with Woody. And for some reason, Woody, I guess this guy had told Woody, do you know this Gary DiFilippo guy? He is buddies with Matt Snell. He puts Gary on the phone with Woody. Woody says, hello, how are you? I want to give you a message because it's really important. I know you and Matt are tight. I want you to know and to tell Matt, I will do anything to get Matt to come back into the family. I hear this yesterday morning after Matt is gone. And Gary embellished, he added to the story. And here's the real kicker. He goes to Matt the next morning, knocks on Matt's door, says, Matt, hey, it's Gary. Can I come in? Yeah, sure. Come on in, Gary. He said, listen, just by chance, I was put on the phone with Woody Johnson last night. And Woody told me that he'll do anything to get you to come back and become part of the Jet family. And in fact, and Gary made this entirely up now, he told me he'll pay you $100,000 a year to be a PR man to help the Jets through public relations. Go a couple of times a year to some Jet functions or whatever, and just smile, be happy, and say hi to the fans or whatever. And Matt turned Gary down flat.
Man, it's tough, Bob. He was a man of his conviction.
It was shocking to me to learn yesterday. But Matt had made up his mind. He was so upset that the hurt had so, been driven so deep inside him that he just couldn't get himself to turn around and do anything else.
Well, it's disappointing, but he's a great Jet. Any Jet fan, young Earl, needs to know who Matt Snell was, and he's the only person who could say scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl wearing a Jet uniform. So he passed away and lived a great life.
I know, and I'll just wind this up by saying I know you got my book and read my book because you were one of the few people to interview me back in 2018 when the book came out, and you were still down in Houston, and I wondered, why the heck is this guy in Houston talking to me about the Jets? But, it's funny. I was invited down to Savannah, Georgia to a book festival at one point that year. And I wondered, why the heck is somebody in Savannah, Georgia inviting me to, a book festival? And I talked to the guy that made the invitation when I got down there. And I said that to him, and he said, Bob, you don't understand. 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, your book, because it covers the entire team, is going to be available in whatever form it's available in at that point, digitally or beyond that. And it's still the only book that really gives voice to all the guys on that team and goes in depth about what they were like and what drove them and what their impressions were of their teammates. And one of the most interesting chapters is, what was the individual player reactions across the gamut of the team when Joe got up that Thursday night before the Super Bowl and guaranteed that they were going to win it. And so it's, this is blatant, but hey, you've got a lot of people who were fans. In fact, I saw one guy yesterday and it said he was a fan since 1964. Take a look at my book. It is not only priceless for old Jet fans, but for even current Jet fans to learn and to become familiar with these guys who were so good. 12 of the Jet players that year, 12 played in the American Football League All-Star game. Imagine that. Across the gamut, offense and defense. So the book really is something that, is cherished by the people who have seen it and used it and read it, because it's a keepsake. It's something you can put on your in your bookcase, and your kids and your grandkids. I mean, I can't wait till my grandkids are old enough to read it, because they live in New York and they're being brought up as Jet fans, and excuse the expression, Cub fans or Met fans, because one of my sons is a big Cub fan since he grew up here in Chicago. But thank you for having me on this morning. I really appreciate it.
Hey, here's the deal. Just got no chance unless you click on that like button. And you got to make sure you subscribe to the Jake Asman Show. You don't, you can get the f*** out. Now let's go, Asmaniacs. We're built for this shit.